Hey everybody, welcome to my very basic guide. In this episode, we'll be learning about how having a magical cannon as your best friend is the only proper way of living your best life. Living in a dangerous fantasy world means that you generally want something that can help ensure your own survival. Being someone who only has theoretical knowledge of the arcane arts will make people think that you are a nerd, but using that arcane knowledge for practical purpose, like building a really big gun that can be reconfigured for different types of destructive tasks, will surely make people more appreciative of your esoteric intellect, or at the very least, less likely to bully you when you bring your cannon to school. These magical gunmen that appreciate big explosions launched from their handiwork are known as the Artillerists, a subclass of the Artificer. The Artillerist is an Artificer specialist that focuses on blowing things to smithereens, while also featuring a decent array of spells and features that are designed for more support-oriented tasks such as insulating your allies from damage, or by giving your party a better overall position on the battlefield. Whatever the case may be, the Artillerist is defined by their capabilities to dig in and begin blasting enemies with the might of your arcane engineering degree, with the first of these Artificer specialist features coming in at level 3. The first subclass specific feature to be getting as an Artillerist is nothing to write home about. It's just gaining tool proficiency with woodcarver's tools, or if for whatever reason you are already proficient at carving up wood, then you get to choose another artisan's tools of your choice. I suppose if your adventuring group ever needs a dedicated arrow maker, then the woodcarver's tool proficiency might be a neat trick to have, or if you ever felt the urge to create a flamethrower out of wood, then I guess the Artillerist tool proficiency feature might be really convenient. Other than that, I guess if your campaign involves bribing children, then being able to manufacture wooden toys might come in pretty handy, or if you guys have a wooden carriage or a wagon that needs periodic maintenance, then I can imagine a dedicated woodcarver in the team can really shine. But other than that, the Artillerist tool proficiency feature will more or less be the introductory appetizer for the meatier parts of the subclass. The more influential aspect of what helps push the Artillerist to be what it is would probably be the Artillerist Spells feature, the subclass dedicated spell list that adds in some freely prepared spells for you to play around with. The Artillerist Spells feature is pretty generous in that it actually gives the Artillerist subclass a complete set of brand new spells from other spellcaster class that are not otherwise found in the Artificer spell list, which is nice to see. Starting off at level 3, you receive the first level spells, Shield and Thunderwave. Shield is just a genuinely good spell for any class to be getting. Plus 5 to your armor class on a reaction is just really helpful for avoiding some nasty damage that can occur at any point in your adventuring life. Thunderwave, on the other hand, does a modest amount of area effect damage for a first level spell, but its main utility is the potential to push enemies 10 feet away from you, which can come in very handy if you are ever surrounded or caught in a grapple, or if you spot a chance to push people off a ledge, ending the fight early. Going up to level 5, the Artillerist gains the second level spells Scorching Ray and Shatter. Both are pretty decent offensively themed spells, with Scorching Ray having the flexibility to pour on a ton of damage on a single target, or you can choose to split it amongst a lot of weaker foes that are more spread out. Shatter can do some great AoE damage on clumps of enemies for a second level spell, although the Constitution saving throw makes the damage less consistent on most monsters. But Shatter is also special in the fact that it is an area effect spell that also damages objects, which is a pretty niche thing to do, but also one that opens up some interesting potential when you consider environmental stuff like dropping a stalactite, causing a cave-in, or simply blowing down a door that was locked. Reaching level 9, you gain 2 new third level spells in the form of Fireball and Wind Wall. Obviously, the iconic Fireball needs no introduction, other than it's a really great spell to use when you want to unleash fire and fury on a large number of enemies that are grouped together. Additionally, it also fits the theme of the subclass really well. Deleting enemies in a gigantic explosion is of course one of the highlights of being an Artillerist. There's also Wind Wall, which I suppose has niche applications, but I don't think you want to be spending a third level spell slot on a concentration spell whose main goal is stopping lightweight projectiles, gases, and small people from reaching you. Though I guess if those problems ever do become serious, then you've got the perfect tool for the job in Wind Wall. Arriving at level 13, the Artillerist Spells feature grant you the 4th level spells Ice Storm and Wall of Fire. Ice Storm is an instantaneous AoE damage dealing spell that is unique for its cylindrical shape, giving you a vertical reach of 40 feet, which is good if enemies are stacked on top of each other or if there's a lot of flying units you want to hit. But Ice Storm is let down by its rather lackluster damage for a 4th level spell, although it does have a nice add-on effect of turning its affected area into difficult terrain until the end of your next turn without it costing concentration. Wall of Fire is a pretty great battlefield control spell. It does good damage while also creating a really intimidating barrier between you and your enemies that you don't want to deal with. It is also a gigantic opaque piece of cover that can help prevent range attackers from targeting your party, which is quite nice. Finally, reaching the final tier of free spells from the subclass feature at level 17, you gain the 5th level spells Cone of Cold and Wall of Force. Cone of Cold is a rather large area effect damage dealing spell that can be really devastating since it uses less commonly resisted damage type than fire, but the caveat is that its damage can be mitigated by a successful Constitution saving throw, and a lot of monsters at level 17 will probably be packing a really large Constitution score. Wall of Force, on the other hand, is the other 5th level spell, and I think it's pretty good, like really good. Wall of Force doesn't do any damage, but its sheer utility is almost unmatched for a 5th level spell. It's good in the same way that Wall of Fire is good as a battlefield divider, but unlike Wall of Fire, it swaps damage for impenetrability. It is pretty tough for most creatures to get through it or to counter it in any way, and that extra bit of reliability makes Wall of Force supremely valuable as a barrier that can completely shut off enemy reinforcements, long-range assailants, or as a way to split up your opponents, making them easier to divide and conquer. However, spells and woodcarver's tools alone cannot create an artillerist. The most important facet of the subclass is of course the big gun that you whip out on your enemies, with the feature Eldritch Cannon that you also get at level 3. This is the artillerist's best friend and magnum opus, the loyal compatriot and partner in crime. The Eldritch Cannon is your mainstay ability, and is the thing that does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. The cannon itself can be either small or tiny sized, with the artillerist being able to pick up and hold the tiny version of the cannon, and the small sized one occupying its own space. The artillerist can create one free cannon per long rest by using their action, and any subsequent manufacturing will cost the artillerist a spell slot per cannon, and you can only have one active cannon at any given time. The Eldritch Cannon itself has an armor class of 18 with hit points that are equal to 5 times your Artificer level, so it has a relatively durable body, and even better, the Eldritch Cannon can actually be healed by the Mending cantrip for 2d6 hit points each, giving it quite an inexpensive way to repair it. Because it is just a magical cannon, it also receives immunity to the poison and psychic damage types. If it ever has to make any saving throws or ability checks, then it will be an unmodified d20 roll, treating the cannon's ability scores as 10s across the board. Your Eldritch Cannon will stick around until it drops to 0 hit points or after 1 hour, so if you keep your cannon safe, it should last you for more than one battle. You can give commands using a bonus action to activate your Eldritch Cannon as long as you are within 60 feet of it, and can also tell the cannon to walk or climb up to 15 feet as long as you remember to give your cannon some legs. Obviously, 15 feet of movement is pretty slow, which will make positioning all the more important if you want a small sized cannon to take up its own space. However, the tiny sized cannon does get around this limitation by the artillerist picking it up and carrying it around with them. Now moving on to the 3 different types of Eldritch Cannons that the artillerist can choose to make, we start off with the Flamethrower. The Flamethrower's activation ability causes it to spew out a fiery 15-foot cone, forcing enemies caught in its area effect to make a dexterity saving throw against the Artillerist spell save DC, and taking 2d8 fire damage on a failed save or half as much on a success. And as an added bonus, the Flamethrower's cannon attack actually causes things to catch on fire if they aren't being worn or carried. Overall, the Flamethrower cannon does have some serious weaknesses in the fact that a 15-foot cone means that it's going to have to get up pretty close to an enemy in order to roast them, and with only a 15-foot movement speed, it might get easily surrounded if it's small sized. If it's tiny, then the artillerist will also have to be dangerously close to the enemy front lines. However, the Flamethrower is still good at fulfilling the niche that it was made for, which is to incinerate big clumps of enemies that are packed tightly together, as long as you can keep your Flamethrower cannon alive over multiple rounds to accrue damage. The second cannon type is a Force Ballista. This is a single target, long-range cannon variant that shoots out a ranged spell attack that does 2d8 force damage to a creature or an object that is within 120 feet of it. If the target of the Force Ballista is a creature, then it automatically pushes them 5 feet away from the cannon. The Force Ballista cannon will probably be the artillerist's bread and butter cannon type that will be your go-to safe damage dealing option, since it has a massive range while also dealing force damage, which is rarely resisted. The Force Ballista specializes in picking off single targets from afar, but also its add-on bonus of being able to push targets 5 feet away from them without a saving throw is pretty interesting, as it gives the artillerist the ability to position enemies more freely, giving a wider berth between the cannon and any melee opponents, and also an easy way to break a grapple, or as a simple way to shove people off cliffs. The last cannon type is known as the Protector, and it's probably the most versatile of the bunch, focusing on defense instead of offense. The Protector, when activated, will belch out temporary hit points equal to 1d8 plus the Artillerist's Intelligence modifier to all allies within 10 feet of the cannon, including the cannon itself. This is a pretty amazing use of a bonus action. Being able to constantly renew your temporary hit point shields each turn is a very strong ability that can easily sustain your party through even very tough encounters, especially from a cannon that protects itself and lasts for an entire hour. Temporary hit points do not stack, but being able to spam the Protector's activation every turn allows you to fish for the highest possible roll, and being able to reliably refresh your team's temporary hit points is a massive durability boost that can save a lot of party resources in the long run. Arriving at level 5, you realize that sometimes having a giant boomstick is not enough for the likes of Vigilant Artillerist, and you wish to explore other security options such as the ability to bear arms, specifically an Arcane Firearm. If you ever dreamed of being a wizard with a gun as your wand, then look no further than Arcane Firearm, allowing the Artillerist to carve sigils in any wand, staff, or rod, turning it into a better spellcasting focus for all of your Artificer spells. Whenever you point your wand gun and cast a spell through it, you get to roll an additional 1d8 and add the result to one of the spell's damage rolls. The wording is pretty specific in that it only gives you a singular d8 to add to the spell you cast through it. So for example, something like Scorching Ray will only get to add a single 1d8 to one of their 3 shots. The Arcane Firearm damage roll will also not benefit from any critical hits because the 1d8 from Arcane Firearm is rolled independently from the regular damage pool and added as a static number at the end of calculations. However, despite the lack of synergy, it is still a fairly good way to boost the damage of big area effect spells like Fireball, Cone of Cold, or Shatter. Arcane Firearm drives home the theme of the Artillerist subclass being a blaster that is at its best when making big explosions to engulf as many enemies as possible and do damage with savage efficiency. Getting all the way to level 9, you may begin to feel that there's a lack of spice in the way your cannon pops your foes, and you begin to crave a last minute display of bravado with the explosive cannon feature. The Artillerist discovers a new destructive force in their good old Eldritch Cannon, buffing the damage output by 1d8 on all of its attacks. But perhaps more interestingly, the explosive cannon feature also gives your cannon buddy a self-destruct button. The Artillerist can now use an action to command the cannon to blow itself up, as long as you are within 60 feet of it. The explosion instantly vaporizes the Eldritch Cannon, and it forces every creature within 20 feet of it to make a dexterity saving throw against the Artillerist spell save DC. If they fail, then they take 3d8 force damage, and only half as much if they succeed. Generally speaking, the Artillerist would want to keep the cannon alive as long as possible and do a sustainable amount of damage over many rounds, as that would be most efficient. However, there are situations where the second half of explosive cannon is useful, such as when your cannon is surrounded by enemies and is going to die soon, or if the 1 hour duration of your Eldritch Cannon is running out, then you might as well leave with a bang. And lastly, as you reach level 15, you gain the subclass capstone feature of Fortified Position. You begin to realize that teamwork makes the dream work, and you and your allies and your cannon would probably stand a better chance of blasting people to death if your allies are alive and acting as a distracting meat shields to prevent enemies from getting in too close. So to beef up your front line, the Eldritch Cannon now emits a shimmering magical field that bathes your teammates in half cover while within 10 feet of the cannon, which is quite good. But what is even more attention grabbing is the fact that Fortified Position allows the Artillerist to spawn 2 cannons on the field now. You can create both cannons at the same time using a single action, but you still have to pay 1 spell slot per cannon. You can also give orders to both cannons using the same bonus action, and can choose to create different cannon types or keep both of them the same. Although, unfortunately, the capstone feature Fortified Position doesn't give you a free additional cannon. You still only generate 1 cannon for free, which is a little annoying, but honestly, the first level spell slots at this point are pretty cheap, and your Eldritch Cannons are worth a lot more, especially now that they give an aura that gives a +2 bonus to armor class and dexterity saving throws to more or less your entire party. With Fortified Position, you no longer have to choose between defense and offense. You get to have the best of both worlds, as you can create 2 different cannons that can cover for each other's weaknesses, or simply go full offense and spam out the exact same damage dealing cannon to quickly brutalize the enemy. And remember that temporary hit points do not stack, so multiple protector cannons are actually useless. But ultimately, Fortified Position is a pretty great final Artillerist feature to be gaining, giving you a lot more defensive utility while also allowing the Artillerist to mix and match different combos for the cannon choices. And that about does it for this very basic guide on the Artillerist subclass of the Artificer, as presented in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. The Artillerist in general has a pretty impressive range of offensive firepower that is supported by a healthy mix of defensive and supportive options that allows the Artillerist to give their party some level of comfort as they blast their way to victory, with no doubt some friendly fire and shell shock along the way. But adventuring life is short and brutal, so pounding your enemies with explosive might before they have a chance to formulate a coherent defense is often the strategy most adventurers go for anyways, but the Artillerist just makes it all the more easier. And as always, I hope that anyone who watches my stuff enjoys what I create as much as I enjoy creating it in the first place. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, goodbye for now.